Welcome to another chapter in our installment of video interviews with lipedema ladies. These ladies are forging a trail of hope for others with this underdiagnosed condition that affects some 11% of all women. And in my Google searching and on a Facebook page, Cheryl Scolage's Facebook page, as a matter of fact, I met a new friend, Siouxsie Boshoff. Siouxsie, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that you're doing this.
I love that I'm doing it too, because you ladies are inspiring and fascinating. And you started a blog called lipedemaliving.com. I recommend it to everybody watching. What was your vision for starting this venture?
Well, it was kind of exciting. What happened was I was on Instagram and I came across this account where the woman clearly had lipedema, and she had over 1 million followers, and she was fabulous. And I was so impressed with her account. And I thought, gosh, she's so courageous. She's just sharing herself without being, she's just fearless. And I remembered when I first got diagnosed that I'd never heard of lipedema. And I remembered when I Googled it and I saw legs that looked like mine, and it was the first time that I'd ever seen legs that looked like mine. And I was a little resentful and I was a little upset. And I kind of felt that a little bit with this woman's Instagram account, a little bit like, where's she when I didn't know? And then I thought, oh, she's just like me. Like, it's up to us to, if we don't share our legs, then nobody knows that our legs exist. And it's like, and it was such an amazing revelation. And I thought, we need to create a platform where we can change the landscape of lipedema and where women can share themselves. So that's where it started.
And you're doing it beautifully, but I want to go back to the beginning of your story, because it's shared on the website, but we get to talk to her live and in person now. You start your story with the statement, I knew my body hadn't been right for years. What did you mean by that? Well,
when I hit puberty, like right around, just on the cusp of turning 12. And I remember I'd gone away for the summer and I'd come back and my body was really different. I'd had thicker thighs and some curves, and it was a little terrifying actually. And I didn't know exactly what to do. Sorry about that, my dog. But I didn't know what to do about it. And my mom tried to be encouraging and tell me that it was fine. And that was the beginning of knowing that I was a little weird looking compared to my friends. And some of my friends made fun of me. I don't know how much I would say that they were friends in retrospect, but they, called me thunder thighs and things like that. And it created a really uncomfortable environment for that awkward stage of, hitting puberty. And then I hid my legs from the world for the rest of my life.
This is another skill that a lot of lipedema ladies develop, which is camouflage.
And oh yeah.
Never to wear certain things. And is that related to this sense of shame that is so pervasive?
For sure. And I don't know that I love the word shame, but it really, it's embarrassment, I think, is probably a better description, where it's so awkward and you can't explain it to somebody else. I don't know what to say. I'm like, yeah, my legs are weird. Hi, and as a teenager, it's terrible. Like, it really is. I would go out of my way to avoid gym class, like to a really bad extent. So yeah.
I used to do that too, and I didn't even have lipedema, but I hated changing in front of the other girls in the gym room. And, you're right. These are awkward stages in life anyhow. And then add to this a condition yet unnamed. You just knew that things were a little bit different. So what happened in the summer of 2012?
So in the summer of 2012, that was really kind of amazing. I had been on a whole food plant-based diet because I already had health problems, and I knew I had health problems, and I was really on a journey to fix my body. And I wasn't doing well. I was having dizzy spells, and I was I couldn't even drive with anymore because I couldn't trust myself to drive properly. And I thought maybe I'm just detoxing, because as I'm losing weight, then the fat is releasing. And actually, I had a medical doctor who's pretty well known in the plant-based world, and that was his assumption as well. So he had me come out to California to see him face to face. And up until then, we were just, he was virtually treating me. Mm-hmm. And when I got out there, he asked a lot of very specific questions. And by then I was already experiencing significant pain. Like I was already having the constant discomfort, and it wasn't just once a month, because in the beginning, when I started having lipedema pain, it was during my period. Mm-hmm. And I would notice it first in my legs, and they would throb, which I thought was weird, because you have cramps, and then what do the legs have to do with that? But there they were. So now it was systemic, and it was everywhere, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I went there, and he kind of squeezed my arm and squeezed my leg where it was a bit nodulary. And he said, "Does that hurt?" And it did. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, you have Derkham's disease," is what he told me.
Derkham's?
Yeah.
So that was the initial diagnosis. You know, there's so many women that maybe would not have taken the steps you did, even first to meet virtually with a doctor, but really this is a condition that seeing and feeling is believing and leading to a diagnosis.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the Derkham's diagnosis, what happened? What was the treatment recommended, and did your life change from that point on?
So he wanted to do something very unconventional, because at the time, the recommended treatment for Derkham's, this was in 2012, at least, that was more mainstream or well-known, because Derkham's is still considered a rare fatty disorder. And so the treatment is IV with lidocaine, and you just go back every few months to top it off. So you basically live your life with this numbing system throughout the body. Now, I don't know if that's correct or true now. There was very little when I went to Dr. Google to get advice. And the doctor that I was seeing didn't feel like that was a good solution. So he actually decided to do something that at the time was probably pretty radical. And he wanted to water fast, me to do a medically supervised water fast. So I did that for 40 days.
Okay, 40 days of a fast? How grumpy were you?
Okay, so the actual science behind water fasting is, if you do water fasting properly, and it's mostly supposed to be in a rested state so that there's no breakdown of any proteins or muscle tissue. So it takes about 3 days for the body to go into ketosis, like on a ketogenic diet. And then what happens is, what the body does is it starts consuming any abnormal fat for nourishment. And then it moves on from that to the visceral fat, which is the really dangerous fat that you have around your organs. And this is where you see the pot belly, right? And then it moves from there to the rest of your fat. So in theory, from the viewpoint of Derkham's disease, he was super excited for me to be an experiment on how this would work, right?
How brave are you?
So you don't get grumpy because you're not really hungry. Like after the third day, it's not like you're ravenous or anything else.
Really?
As weird as it is.
Lord knows I've never gotten past one day. I remember one time, little story, my church was doing a 24-hour fast, and I hid Cheetos in my pocketbook because there was just no way I could do it. So 40 days sort of says to me, you really meant business about finding an answer. And that's what I find with so many of these lipedema ladies. They'll do anything to help their condition. So what happened at the end of 40 days? So you weren't grumpy or cranky because your body gets used to it. Did you have results?
I did have results, but I also had a lot of discomfort. It was not, I will not say that the 40 days was easy. Grumpy wasn't the word, but I was super queasy and dry heaving, and we did break it up like after 20 days and then reignite it, because it was really rough for me. And his assumption on it is because he thinks that Dr. Clapper felt that it was because of the fact that I was eating, that I was toxic. And as the fat was breaking down, that it was releasing toxins. Wow. So, and you can't drink more water. There's actually, you can actually get water poisoning if you drink too much water. So people think, oh, did you just drink tons of water? No, you drink a moderate amount of water and you rest. And I watched the Food Network mostly. And he thought that was hilarious because I guess most patients do. Yeah.
No, I do want to say that in these lipedema lady conversations, there are a lot of different paths and methods that different people have used. We want to stress that nothing that we're saying is medical advice or direction. Please, none of you listening to this say, oh, gee, I'll do a 40-day fast. This was doctor supervised.
That's right.
And there's no way you would ever recommend this being done any other way. So you were watching Network, fun, that's ironic, and releasing toxins.
Yeah.
And
it was hard. I mean, and I also want to add to that, medically supervised. The place that I went to, they did doctor rounds twice a day, and they checked all my vitals. They did blood work once a week and additional tests. Like, it really is in a controlled environment. When we broke the fast, they broke it with a whole food plant-based diet. So it throws you out of ketosis like instantly. And I don't know how I feel about that, knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
So I did okay, but then after the fast, there were some things that resolved and were great, but the inflammation that I had, like, I still had pain. So, and it wasn't particularly improved, although I did shrink more, but I have pictures of me pretty tiny because I'd already lost a lot of weight from being a whole food plant-based vegan. I'd already lost considerable weight, and then I lost another almost 30 pounds in that 40 days, which I didn't actually expect, and I didn't go there with that intention. But you could still see that classic lipedema. My legs still looked big. And I definitely had the body dysmorphia.
Yeah. Yes. And here's another interesting thing. So many people, when I'm sharing what I'm learning about lipedema, they're like, oh, I bet they really want to just reduce their size. I'm like, it's not just about that.
No.
So the pain still was a factor. Even though you had lost yet another 30 pounds, you were dealing with pain.
Oh, completely. So that led me to keep researching. So I kept Googling anything I could about Derkham's disease. Because even my doctor was like, I don't know how else to help you. You just have to keep eating well and move through it. And I was exercising. I was eating a whole food plant-based diet. I was eating a lot of grains. Like, I ate not junk food vegan, but definitely the forks over knives, whole food plant-based, right? So lots of grains, lots of legumes, and all of that kind of thing. And I was inflamed, like I was 100% inflamed. So over the course of that year, I just kept looking for solutions, and periodically I would search on Google. And that's when I found Dr. Herbst, because she's one of the leading authorities on Derkham's disease, if not the leading authority on Derkham's disease in the United States.
And so you, tenacious you, I love your resilience and your fire to continue to seek answers. And you weren't giving up, were you?
No.
I can tell. You're not that kind of person. You created a website called Lipedema Living. So you find Dr. Herbst and you say, Dr. Herbst, I have Derkham's. And she said,
no, you don't. Like, she went through everything and she was so awesome. And she said, you know, you don't have Derkham's disease. You do have lipedema. And I was like, what is lipedema?
Lipo what?
Yeah, exactly. And when she explained it, it was everything fit in place. Because even the Derkham's didn't 100%, but I was in so much pain and I definitely had nodules. So it's not like it was unrealistic. Yeah. But her description of lipedema was everything. And I was like, oh, tick, 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 tick. Yes, 100%.
So for those who maybe don't know, and to educate me too, what distinguishes Derkham's from lipedema?
Well, Derkham's disease, and I'm not an authority on it, and because I'm not diagnosed with that, I haven't really been doing that. And there are lipedema ladies that do have Derkham's as well. And it is possible maybe that I do have that. But the overriding thing that is affecting me is lipedema. So the lipedema tends to stay in the legs and the arms, depending on the type of lipedema. And it is very distinct where you have that, you have the bigger thighs. You have these thighs that look a little bit like, you know, like my thighs, like most of us, right? Where they have this little shelf on them.
So I'm going to continue to direct people to visit your website, lipedemaliving.com. That's where you see these beautiful photos of Siouxsie and her beautiful daughters. And we'll get into talking about them because this is a hereditary condition as well. So, and by the way, you know, you talk about your thighs, and we can only see you from sort of the chest up. You're beautiful. Oh. And inside and out. And I think that that's one of the challenges I hear with lipedema ladies is embracing their awesomeness and embracing their beauty. Look, we all got something, right?
We do. And even my skinny friends, they have things that they hate about themselves. And I think that it's just magnified by the fact that we have lipedema. And I hope that our website and with social media and interviews like what you're doing will change that narrative. That is my hope. That's my hope too. Yeah. I think the more we can and raise awareness and find answers, we'll get this tribe together, and this tribe is a powerful tribe. So I'm very excited and privileged to continue these conversations. So you got a true diagnosis, and that felt good. It's like, okay, finally I can get behind this. And if I know you as much as I know you, you probably then began digging and learning everything in the world you could learn about lipedema. I did. There were two things that happened. One, like I said, after I left the appointment, I Googled lipedema, and I was able to find some limited things. And one of the things that Dr. Herbst had said was to join a Facebook group, and she gave me directions on where to go. Because, you know, this is going back to 2013. So now the group was much smaller. We didn't all know about each other. We weren't as organized, I would say, as we are now. And yeah, it was kind of amazing. So when I was waiting to get allowed in the group, I was looking at pictures of other women's legs, like I said, and my husband came by and he was like, he actually stopped, kind of startled. And this was not, I wasn't in the lipedema group. I was just on the internet. And he stopped and he goes, "What are your legs doing on the internet?" Like, he was not ashamed or upset, but like, how did that just happen? And I was like, "What's she doing showing her legs on the internet?" And I said, "Those aren't my legs, babe. That's lipedema." And he was so startled because, you know, we've been married for over 30 years now, but he'd been with me for most of my life. And he's the first person that ever actually saw my legs. And, you know, he doesn't care, but he knew what it did to me. So he knows why we won't do water sports. And, you know, everybody's like, "Oh, having a pool party," and I'm like conveniently completely unavailable, or I'm a hostess that stays in the house, you know, because it's too hot out there. Yeah, there's a lot of lipedema ladies nodding right now. And even those of us who don't have lipedema but have had weight struggles throughout their life, we all know those excuses that we make to not be seen. So I get that. But I was so struck by your story on your website, because you said you found something that said it was a cure. And it caused you to travel all the way to Germany. We're all wanting to hear about that. So yes, I was a little overwhelmed. And I think that most women, when they first find out they have lipedema, even when they join the groups, they can feel a little overwhelmed by this. I think it's really important to communicate the message that it's not as overwhelming as it seems at first. And I got the impression that I was going to be spending the rest of my life spending hours every single day trying to manage this condition. And that just isn't actually the way it is, but I didn't know. I was still naive and I was still younger. And so I saw a post from somebody who'd had surgery and said that she was pain-free. And at this point, my pain level was, I would probably say, a strong 6-7 consistently. And sometimes it would go higher than that, and I would hide. And I just wouldn't even go out of my house because I couldn't hide it. And I didn't like the effect it had on other people, because they would see me and I'm usually pretty cheerful and bubbly, and I wasn't. And it was like, you know, if you go out with a migraine and somebody's like, how's it going? And you're like, oh, it's great. But you don't, you can't hide it, you know?
Sure.
So I was desperate. And so then I started researching it, and I went to Germany, and I had my surgeries with Dr. Joseph Stutz. It was awesome.
Now this is not surgery that is really done in the United States, or it's certainly not common in the United States.
In 2013, it wasn't. When we went there, it was kind of exciting, I will tell you honestly. I was there at the same time that some of the other people that you see in the lipedema arena were there, like Kathy Siouxie. She was there filming her documentary. The doctors that came with her, they were there watching surgeries. So there were probably about 12 of us from the United States as women. But then in addition to us, there was also many different physicians that were coming to learn how to do this lymphatic sparing liposuction. And there may have been doctors here in the US, but they hadn't figured out how to get found through search engines yet. And there wasn't a lot of talk about them in any of the groups. So the only thing we knew was that we had to go to Germany to do it. So yeah.
And so off you go to Germany. And what did this whole process entail? I mean, you had to have some pre-surgical, obviously, training, and I know the compression post-surgery was really important. Can you paint the picture for us? A lot of women out there are like, I'm considering surgery, and it's no joke, and you certainly have to be up for it, and it's not like, okay, I'm fixed. So paint the picture of your surgical journey. The first one.
The first one. So, I mean, in terms of going there, I had not worn any compression. And it is absolutely recommended now that you start doing whatever you can to prep the body so that the fibrosis breaks down and is softer. Like, this is not me saying that. This is, I've heard Dr. Herb say it. I've heard many of the different physicians talk about it. I didn't have any of that, and I didn't get to prep for that. And I'll tell you why I think that was not awesome as well. But so I didn't wear any compression prior to surgeries. I didn't do any of that. I didn't do any MLD, which is manual lymphatic drainage. I wasn't doing anything. I just arrived in Germany with my husband. We do have a history of blood clotting on my family, so we opted to stay there through all 3 surgeries. So we stayed for 2 months. And they did do a little bit of treatment before, which was great. It's called Endermologie, where there's a wand and it kind of massages to help make it a little bit softer. And I did do that as a pre-op treatment. That's in my blog, where I detail a little bit more about that. Yeah. But yeah.
And then you had a complete sort of suit you had to wear afterwards. After the surgery?
So interestingly enough, the pain level that I was in was so significant that, and it was so profoundly obvious. I had gotten to the point where I was probably maybe a year away from fully being in a wheelchair, I would say, in terms of my mobility. I was in so much pain. In fact, we accidentally, when we first arrived in Germany, we went to get our rental car because where we were staying was a little town called Bad Steben, and it's a tiny little Bavarian town, literally tiny. And so they didn't have car rentals or anything like that. We had to take a train to this town nearby called Hof, which is a big city in Bavaria. And we got not very good directions to go to the rental car, and we didn't Uber or anything or take a taxi. We walked. And it was supposed to be just up the road, and it wasn't. And we ended up taking a much longer route. And we were probably halfway there, and I was like in tears. And my poor husband, there were no benches, there was no place for me to sit down. And it was just one of these moments where I had to push myself through it. And by the time we got to the car rental place, I was a mess. And I just sat there sort of in suppressed grief because I was surrounded by people, but I was in so much pain and I was so exhausted that I could hardly function. And that was before my surgery. But even after my first surgery, between my first and my second surgery, okay, so the cool thing about going to Germany is in all of these little towns in Bavaria, they have castles, and the castles are magical. And I mean, a lot of the towns have castles. So we made it a point, because you have to walk every day. So we tried to walk at least 45 minutes every day. And after the surgeries, so we decided to go to Neuschwanstein, which is the mother of all castles. It's what the Disney castle is made after. And it's yeah. And so we drove down to there, but we stopped at lots of other little towns and went castle hunting. We even stayed in a castle one night, totally by accident, which was just serendipitous. But so we went to Neuschwanstein, and when you go there, it is a steep climb, and I mean steep, for I want to say 35 minutes to walk up to the castle. I totally did. And it was one of those moments where I was tired, because probably that was a little bit much, but I did it. And I had this moment where my eyes welled up, where I was like, I absolutely would not have been able to do that without this. Like, absolutely. And that was only after my first surgery. So that gives you the contrast. Yeah.
But that gives hope, because nobody looking at you today would say this woman would have difficulty doing anything. You have such energy and vim and vigor, but you know, even your spirit had to be overwhelmed because of the pain. So after the first surgery, you saw an improvement in your mobility, your ability to engage in life again. And then you had subsequent surgeries, each building on the last. You were telling me a funny story about some kind of suit you had to zip up or something after one of the surgeries.
So they put you in custom compression, at least at Dr. Stutz's office. I can see, you know, in following the different groups, that it's kind of done a little bit differently. In some cases, women will get their own compression, but this was part of the whole process. And so they have custom compression made for you. And it's pretty, if you've not tried to get into compression, I just want to tell you that if you thought Spanx were a little insane, this is totally next level. And the trick is dishwashing gloves, actually, which I learned.
These tips are amazing. I learned about mucin the other day from one lipedema lady. Now, dishwashing gloves and compression, you got to tell us this story.
So the dishwashing gloves, preferably the kind with the little bits on your fingers, so that with the little grippies, is actually kind of amazing. And the difference is night and day. It is what allowed me to actually get into my compression in relatively, you know, less pain and trauma, because there's nothing that will rip your dignity off of you than trying to into compression, because you've got, in our case, there's the little gap so that you take it off once it's on. So if you need to use the restroom or something like that, you're leaving it on. Once they put it on you after surgery, it's I wore it for 12 weeks, and I showered in it and I blow dried it, and it was a little insane, but that was how that particular procedure went. And yeah, it was intense.
Okay, and I think there's probably a lot of people that are saying on their grocery list, ooh, dishwashing gloves, need them. I probably need them for my Spanx too. So you went out there hearing I'm cured by another patient, and it did help, but it turned out to not really be a cure.
Yeah, there was a couple of things, and I'm sad about it, because I was diagnosed with lipedema, and even Dr. Stutz, when he saw me, I definitely have secondary lymphedema. So I'm lipolymphedema, and because of that, there really is the reality of, you know, you've got this fluid that builds up throughout the body, and yes, it can be reduced, in my experience, from diet, but it also has to be reduced through movement and through actually getting it out. So what happened was, I was under the impression, and it could just be that I also misunderstood, although I did go back through my notes. They were really clear with me from Dr. Stutz's office that that it was important that I build up my own body's elasticity and that I don't become dependent on compression. So the moment it was okay for me to not wear compression, that was it. And I didn't wear compression at all. And that, I think, was my undoing, even though it took time. So yeah, I didn't have 100% relief. And that made me feel uncomfortable because some people were about that. But I also hadn't prepped my fat before. And now we know that lipedema fat is like, they can be this big, a nodule. Yeah. That's not going to get sucked into a cannula. I don't care how amazing the doctor is. So
I want to stress this point too, because I learned this from you. Lipedema fat is not your normal fat. You said you had chicken nugget sized nodules.
Yeah.
And the normal way to get rid of them, the small incisions, are not as effective.
Well, and it's specifically because the cannula has a 3 millimeter or less opening. It's really tiny. So it could suck out like, you know, a grain of rice, and you use the tumescent fluid to break down the fat and to soften it, right? But some of these fibrotic fat nodules, they're not going to break down. And there was actually a particular part behind my right knee that Dr. Stutz really tried hard to alleviate because it's really noduley back there, and it wasn't successful. Like I'm still, and I have a nodule. It's the size of one of those marbles that you would use as a shooter. Yeah.
Again, your story is one of tenacity and not giving up, because you had 3 surgeries in Germany, had some improvement, but said there's got to be more. And your searching led you to a doctor in the United States who you say is obsessed with lipedema. What did that doctor offer to you? And what was the time frame? So Germany was in what year?
Was in 2013.
And then
in 2014, sorry. So I got diagnosed at the end of 2013, and I had my surgeries in the beginning of 2014. So I was there from February through April in Germany.
Yeah. And then you found the United States doctor obsessed with lipedema in what year?
Just last year, actually.
So it was several years of continuing to manage your condition and realizing that there were still some unresolved issues. And how did you find this doctor? Google? Dr. Google?
Well, actually, okay, so emotionally, I have to just rewind for a second because of how I was physically doing and my lipedema pain as I'm 49, so I'm in perimenopause and I'm hitting that stage, and I just noticed that the pain was getting more and more significant, and I was like, this is lipedema pain, like what is going on? And it was very troubling. So I did not know that the lipedema fat was different yet. I thought that I thought we still awkwardly accumulated fat because of maybe inflammation, but nobody was sure. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of travel in the last 2 years, which was actually quite terrible for lipedema because I wasn't wearing compression and it wasn't good for my lymphedema. Mm-hmm. And the swelling and the pain was getting worse and worse. So fast forward to now, last year, I was actually scrolling through Instagram, and this doctor had the pictures of the fat, and he said, this is regular fat, and he showed it, and this is lipedema fat, and you cannot compress it because it's nodules, and it's different. And I was like, what? And then he talked about doing this manual lipedema extraction where he actually manually removes the lipedema. So that was when I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Wow. Sign me up, right? If I know you, you were like, okay, where's the next plane? It was in California, correct?
I did, yeah.
And so you had that surgery?
No, I did not.
Okay, so is that, go ahead.
It doesn't, so he can take insurance, but I don't have insurance that can cover that. So we're working that out, but I also want to actually aggressively handle it as much as I can naturally. so that I personally, I want to go into it with my body in the best possible shape. I love watching the stories of the girls that he's helping. I still think it's fantastic. If he'd been around then, it may have been different, but I don't have regrets that I did what I did, because I don't think I wouldn't have made it another year. And I was able to crisscross the globe multiple times. I've traveled all over the world with my husband, and I've spent weeks, you know, just stomping all over Italy, and it's been fantastic. And I could have never done that if I hadn't had the surgeries. So I don't have regrets, but I definitely don't have it fully managed. So now, the first thing he told me, this was last year when I did a virtual consultation with Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Jamie Schwartz. And he said, you know, you're wearing compression. And I said, no, I hate compression. And he was like, okay, you actually need to wear compression. And then he explained to me what it does and how it reduces inflammation and how it, you know, helps to hold the channels firm so that you can actually move the lymph. And I went, oh, okay. And so I started wearing compression. And he said, you know, you'll probably hate it the first few days, but then you'll probably fall in love with it and never want to live without it. And he's completely correct for me. Yeah.
It's so wonderful that you've begun that dialogue. And this again speaks to each person's unique journey, because you're choosing to go a completely natural path. You'd rather not take any drugs. You really are ready to face this on with supplements. And what are some of the other things that you're doing besides the new protocol of compression in your life to manage your lipedema?
So movement obviously is always important. We have like a stationary bike here in the house. I'm in Florida. It is really brutally hot right now. I do have a little spa. So, you know, just even going in there and doing the leg kicks and lunges and things like that, just to move the body, obviously, and elevating where I'll lie on my back and I'll pick up all the way up the wall. And then deep breathing, this lymphatic breathing, which massages the lymph, which has been very fascinating, and very much diet. And I'm looking to do, I want to also do pneumatic lymphatic press is what I really would love to do, because I think that would help as well.
We are excited about you trying it, because you're the kind of person that will document what's happening with it. And we really are talking to a lot of lipedema ladies because we want their feedback on their experience. I talked to a woman yesterday who is 5'8" and 140 pounds. I said, I wish I had your statistics. And you have lipedema? And she said, yeah. And the thing is, the Lympha Press Optimal Plus has given her such renewed mobility and reduced swelling. So that's good stuff. We definitely will talk more about that. We'll stay connected on that. But your beautiful daughters, because they are prominently on your website, which is lipedema-living.com. They're stunningly gorgeous, just like their mom, and they have lipedema.
Yeah, neither of them are properly diagnosed. But my oldest daughter, Amber, you can see her. She also writes for the blog, and she has the classic presentation, and she already started to present with lipedema, you know, many years ago. And it was one of those things that as a mother, this is tough. Like, do I want to impose my inconveniences in my life on her? Do I want to even put that in her world so that she's thinking about it? Not so much, but I would just kind of tentatively ask how she's doing, because I noticed it was getting a little more pronounced, specifically the legs and difficulty with the ankles. And she was talking about how her knees were giving her trouble, and that she'd get these sharp pains and she would get this discomfort, and she couldn't handle too much pressure on her legs, and she'd spontaneously bruise. And I'm just sitting there going, so there comes a point when, as a grown-up, you have to have this conversation with me. I am not trying to put my condition on my daughters, because that's not what I want. But when you're really familiar with the condition, you can spot it in other women, and she's definitely pronounced. And then my my younger daughter, she's actually a model and she's a dancer, and she's really aggressive at exercising and eating well. And no matter what she does, she can't handle her thighs. She's already had cool sculpting. She's had other things as well, which aren't necessarily recommended for lipedema. There is more research that has to be done with regards to that. And, you know, but she's 28. She's like, whatever, Mom, I know what I'm doing. And she's just going to do it anyway. But she does have the thicker ankle and the less defined knees, and she's aware of that. And she hates wearing heels that emphasize her ankles. And she's always been like that, even though she looks amazing. And she's always had this little extra. We're definitely curvy. There's no getting around that in this household. And it can be a blessing, but it's also, you know, at the same time, a curse.
Well, I think what a blessing is all this research you've done so that you could recognize it in your daughters, because the key is keeping it from progressing. If you can identify it early on, it doesn't have to develop to the later stages, which are soul crushing and so difficult for me to even see those photos. And yet I empathize with those women and their struggles. But truly, getting a diagnosis and getting intervention sooner rather than later. If you even have an inkling that you might be a lipedema lady,
that's right,
you need to get some help. I always refer people to the lipedemaproject.com website. There's an interactive map where you can find a practitioner that is an expert, hopefully one in your area. You've been so generous with your time, I want to just give you the floor, Siouxsie, and if you were to give any parting words of advice or encouragement to the lipedema ladies out there, or the ones who think they may be, what would that be?
Well, it would be, you have a tribe. You're totally not alone, and you're surrounded by some of the most amazing women. And even those that think that they're not amazing, it's not true. I mean, we actually are beautiful, and we're dynamic, and we do incredible things. It's not the most impossible thing to manage. It's really not. You do have to find what works for you. So it does take a little bit of work, and I understand with life that can be hard, but it's worth it. And you can still live an amazing life, and you can dress your body in a way that you feel absolutely stunning in, and you don't have to let lipedema define you. That would be my message, because it really, there's so many beautiful women that are embracing it and living an amazing life. And just find them and connect with them and use them for inspiration until you find your own. Like, this is, I think, such an important component in addition to the nutrition end of it, because it is that personal space. You know, I've heard girls say, oh, I hope that someday I'll fall in love or I'll find a man. I'm like, do you have any idea how many men absolutely adore our figures? I'm sorry, but it's a lot. So, and you find these women that are married, that these men adore them and love them, and just as they are. And so the legs thing, it doesn't define us. So that would be the thing that I would say.
I have goosies just listening to you, because that is your message. And I'll add one more thing to it, because I spent many years of my life waiting for Prince Charming to come along and love me so then I could love myself. And then I realized there's one person you're going to spend the rest of your life with, for sure. And that's you. So I decided I needed to love me. And it's interesting, when you make that shift, so much happens. So many beautiful things come to you because you feel that you're worth it. And I want to leave you with this message. Ladies, you are worth it. You are worth it. You are worth it. You are worth it. I encourage you to go and visit lipedemaliving.com. You also have a YouTube channel, don't you?
Not for Lipedema Living. I blog in my other world as well. Okay. As a result of having lipedema, where I started researching non-toxic things to live with and have in my life, and foods and stuff like that. And I just launched a channel, and it's on intentional living. I mean, they still cross over to the same thing. It really is about deciding that you take the reins and owning your life. And there's good that can happen. And you don't know, what if the reason that one of us has lipedema is so that we can actually help change the world with our message of hope and with our message of change? We don't know. So,
and I have to say in closing too, we're both based in Florida. So
yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe we could have a Lipedema lady event at some point and gather the tribe together here. We're in our area in South Florida, and who knows what this can build to. We just know that we're so glad that you gave us your time today. First of all, Siouxsie, thank you for your time. Thank you, viewers, for your time. And please, if you know someone who would make a great interview to inspire the Lipedema ladies, shoot me an email at bviola@medsoulsupplier.com. I would love to tell the stories. Telling the stories gives power to the message. And these are empowered women whose voices deserve to be heard. Thanks for being here today and have a great day.